Good afternoon. My name is Luigi Dante Gaviano. I'm a third-year PhD student in economics here at the University of Cambridge.
My name is Havemeister. I'm also a third-year PhD economics student here in Cambridge. And we're very fortunate to have you, Professor Philippe Aghion, with us today. Professor Philippe Aghion is the 2025 Nobel Prize Laureate in Economics. Congratulations.
Thank you.
A professor at the Collège de France and at the London School of Economics, an associate of the CEPR, and also a fellow of the Econometric Society and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences.
So we're delighted to have Professor Aghion here with us today. He has produced truly pioneering research on innovation, the economics of growth, competition, regulation. Along with his co-authors, Professor Aghion has really transformed our understanding of concepts such as Schumpeterian creative destruction, sustained economic growth, and it's a long list indeed. We are interviewing Professor Aghion just before his two Marshall lectures that will take place today and tomorrow. These are entitled Rethinking Capitalism, the Power of Creative Destruction, which is probably a very elegant summary of his whole research agenda, I suppose. The Marshall lectures, of course, are a truly prominent part of the academic calendar in Cambridge, and they honor the memory and contributions of the late Professor Alfred Marshall, one of the pioneers of modern economics.
So yes, Professor Aghion, welcome to the Faculty of Economics and the University of Cambridge. First of all, could you give us a brief preview of what your Marshall lectures will be about?
So today I will really talk about, the Schumpeterian framework, the Schumpeterian growth framework that we've introduced with my co-author Peter Howitt, and argue that it allows us to think about rethink enigma in economic history, can help us rethink policy making, and help us rethink capitalism, which kind of capitalism we want, and that's what I will do today. And tomorrow I will talk about AI. Should we fear AI? That will be the theme of tomorrow's lecture.
Excellent. So actually on this note, against this backdrop of course, creative destruction as one of the engines of economic growth, we were wondering about so of course there is recent evidence of a declining business dynamism in many Western countries. I have in mind a lot of research in the US, for example, showing lower entry and exit rates by firm. And so I would ask you, first of all, what in your view has caused this falling dynamism? And then secondly, again on the same topic, whether this is a concern in your view for the prospect for long-run productivity growth in the US and in the euro area.
So there are various explanations that have been put forward to explain the decline, productivity growth in the US following the upsurge between 1995 and 2005. One was that ideas would be harder to find. Okay, that's the kind of Chad Jones, et al., which all of them are fantastic colleagues. My view is that ideas always end up getting harder to find in any particular field, but we always invent new lines, new fields. And so overall, ideas may not be harder to find. Particularly with AI, less than ever, I believe that ideas will be harder to find. They may become harder to find in each particular, subsector or whatever. But if you keep inventing new lines of research, and then you start again the clock. So that explanation I don't truly believe. One I believe in is that that's what I will argue today, during so you had this growth expansion between 1995 and 2005 in the US was the IT revolution. The IT revolution was very much harnessed by a few firms that became superstar firms, Walmart, Amazon, Google, and they expanded through merger and acquisition a lot. And they ended up, inhibiting innovation by new entrants. And that might be, very much related to the slowdown that we observe. So then the idea is that you need to reconcile competition policy, to adapt competition policy to the new technological revolution. So that's something I've mentioned today and I'll mention again tomorrow.
You mentioned the US. Do you think the same is true for Europe?
And I think the same is true for Europe. Okay. Yeah. We have a very much market-based, static competition policy. We should move toward more dynamic competition policy.
When we look at your work on this creative destruction, it is really seen as one of the main drivers of innovation and productivity growth, which is a good thing per se. You do, however, in some of your work also highlight some of the distributional concerns that can arise from creative destruction. For instance, in unemployment, in income inequality, and so on. So could you just share with us your thoughts on kind of the key concerns
yes.
and to what extent can we offset these by policy?
Yes. So first thing with innovation has to do with inequality, but in a way which is not obvious. On the one hand, when you innovate, you get innovation rents. That makes you, jump up to the upper layers of the income distribution. But on the other hand, innovation is associated with creative destruction. That's a source of social mobility. So innovation has a relationship with inequality, which is ambiguous. On the one hand, you boost top income inequality, but on the other hand, you also boost social mobility. So the effect of innovation on global measures of inequality like Gini, you don't see much there, unlike other sources of top income inequality. That's one thing I wanted to emphasize. The other thing is that is the fact that with AI particularly, you may be worried that many people may lose their jobs. And that's why I think it's very important to have a flex security system like in Denmark. When you lose your job in Denmark, you get 90% of your salary for 2 years, and the state retrains you and helps you find a new job. I think we need to go towards this kind of we need to emulate the Danish example, I think.
Okay, so your policy prescription would be to take a similar system to Denmark and apply it to countries.
I don't copy, but to learn from the Danish experience more. Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to redistribution, I think we need to have as much social mobility as we can. Good education system and good flex security system. That's really a guarantee. And good competition policy. That's also to make sure that new entrants can come in. When you have those three, I think you are also in good shape for social mobility.
Okay, thank you.
So as we are seeing now, your research always comes with very clear policy implications. And these are, I would class them as being kind of the optimal policy implications, right? Kind of what we would like to write down on paper, what we would like our policymakers to do. But as we know, there are political constraints, institutional constraints. And so I was wondering about your thinking on the gap between maybe an optimal policy implication and a feasible policy implication. If you could comment on that.
Political economy, for example, in France, ideally, we need to work longer. We need to delay the retirement age. But that's a big problem in France. So we have to get around the age constraint, maybe look at the point system or ways that you get around. There is a psychological effect of this minimum age. You see, that's a kind of barrier in France. People are very reluctant. They don't like to be imposed a minimum age of retirement, below which you get nothing, above which you get everything. So that we have to get around that. So you have to take this kind of constraint into account. For example, I pushed in France for stopping the clock. They had a law where every 6 months, you would delay retirement age. Mm-hmm. And now we are close to 63. Mm-hmm. And beyond 63, the unions are very angry, and there is a kind of huge opposition. And I recommended that between now and the presidential election, we freeze at 62 years, at the current, which is 62 years old and 9 months, almost 63 years old. And then there should be a debate during the next presidential election on which kind of pension reform we want, but with the possibility of a kind of point system, which is much more flexible. So that's where political economy comes in, you see. You can see there. Optimally, if you are purely Pigouvian, you would push for, put the retirement age at 67 or 68. But of course, if you do that, you get back to the yellow vest. And so
relatedly, I guess in your mind are solutions that kind of bridge a gap between feasible and optimal, flexible solutions.
Yeah, exactly. That you feel that, you try to get as close as you can to, but you have the political constraint. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's important because the political constraint translates into economics. If we had another veto of the current French government, the spread, the difference between French interest rate and German interest rate would go up further, and the stock market would go down further. So as soon as we announced the freezing of the age, the stock market started to rise again.
Actually, while we're on the topic of kind of policy, because of course your research is very relevant for policy, but you're an academic economist primarily. Yeah. How do you perceive this dialogue with policymakers? Should economists try and be even more applied in their work?
I think they should keep doing their research. I think it's important that research goes on. And there are some of us are more theoretical or more, and with less interface with policymakers, and others are more. I think the way it goes is fine. I think we don't have to change. The problem sometimes is when some of us we move from research to making policy recommendations. Sometimes it can be a bit ideological. That's where there is a problem. But I think otherwise it's no problem at all. Although I think it's good in the US and the UK that you have, university, that you have PhDs becoming head of central banks or finance minister. In France, it's very rare. In France, a few of them have come from university, which I think is a pity.
So we'll stick to research.
Exactly. I think it's nice to your comparative advantage. Follow your comparative advantage.
Then actually on the topic of research more, I was wondering, we were touching on declining business dynamism already, but obviously even though this is happening across the globe or across advanced economies, there's still this productivity gap between Europe and the US, and everybody's very interested in that at the moment, and is asking, what can we do to close the gap, or at least to narrow it down? Do you have any insights on this?
The Draghi report, and I've been working with Mario Draghi and John Van Reenen and others, whom you know well. I've been working with him, and so the diagnostics is that, for Europe to narrow down the gap with the US, technological gap with US and China, we need a true single market, at least for high tech. Because otherwise you don't have a market for innovation, but innovation is done elsewhere. And that also allows you also to have more competition when you have a more integrated market. So you need a true single market, which we don't have. There is a practice of gold plating. Each country, adds its own regulation to the European regulation. We call that gold plating. So that's not good. We need a true financial ecosystem of innovation. Venture capital is underdeveloped. Financial institutional investors, we don't have much, many of them. UK is a bit more developed, and Sweden. Sweden has institutional investors, but we should emulate, the example of Sweden and develop, a financial ecosystem of innovation. And we don't have anything like the DARPA, Defense Advanced Project Agency, which is a pro-competition way to do industrial policy, and that we don't have. Also, we don't have either in Europe. So on all those dimensions, Europe can improve.
So in a way, more regulation to give a framework for...
No, it's not more. I say no. You would have more single market, financial ecosystem, and the DARPA, and the kind of industrial policy Because in Europe, we tend to we used to very much have to rule out industrial policy in the name of competition policy. And it's true that a certain way of doing, there is one way to do industrial policy which is really anti-competition, where you pick the winner. But we know that there are ways with DARPA, for example, that you can reconcile industrial policy and competition policy. So we should pursue this line of policy.
In your mind, these policies should be implemented at EU level?
Well, I don't know. As much as you can do EU, but maybe a coalition of the willing may be the way. With UK there. For DARPA, UK should be part. So you could imagine France, Germany, and UK, for example, starting some DARPA. So I think the UK, as much as we can, the UK should be involved.
This links back to what we were saying earlier about there being constraints on the implementation of desirable policies.
Exactly, you have political economy barriers, so that you don't want to align on the mean, you want to align on the max. And that's where the coalition of the willing, I think, is important. And maybe have the European Commission, a vector to help countries that are not initially in the part of the coalition to join the coalition. That could be a new role for the European Commission, to help them join the coalition.
Are you concerned that political cycles, such as elections in the big European countries and so on, might slow down the adoption of this agenda, for instance?
Always there is an election thing, For example, we excessively prolonged whatever it takes after COVID, because we had upcoming elections in 2022. And that has contributed enormously to increasing the public debt in France. The fact we had those elections, which induced all parties to delay nobody would dare to say we stop the whatever it takes.
Actually, so we've touched upon different areas of economics, from innovation to regulation, competition policy. What we were curious is also to ask you whether you think some areas of economics are understudied. So whether there is some kind of misallocation of economists' attention to certain topics. What topics do you think deserve more attention, more research?
I think the research is going okay. I mean, I'm not there, complaining maybe that there is not enough research on this, on that, in economics. It's more like the interplay between research and policy making, which more concern for me. Because I think you have people working on inequality, people working on behavioral, people working on I'm not very much I'm not very worried about misallocation of research effort in economics. I would be very wrong, but.
So we need more dialogue rather than.
More dialogue, yeah.
And so economists are sometimes known to be very contained to their field in a way. Do you think there's anything from other fields that we could learn from?
But we learn already, psychology and economics, you have all the behavioral, you have political economy, is very between politics and economy, you have economists, they interact with other disciplines, for example, theory of organization, a lot of sociologists of organization. So I think there are interplays between economists and non-economists on the various issues, and maybe there could be more. Law and economics also has become a kind of vibrant field. Maybe there can always be more, but I don't.
All of these are more or less recent kind
exactly.
of advances, So it seems that as we go forward, there's more interaction.
There will be more, yeah. But it's important also to keep the rigor, the standards that you have in your field. Because otherwise, if you just go in pure interdisciplinary, you fall between the cracks, as we say. And then mediocrity can really come in easily. So it's very important that you are on top of your field. And then you can reach out to other fields, and they can do the same. But I think it's very good that you start from a very good, solid base.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of being on top of your field, you just received the Nobel Prize in Economics, of course, which is a remarkable achievement. So what is next for you? We were wondering, is there anything...
It's not like I got the Nobel Prize and now I look for another reward. No. Quite the opposite. We just got an ERC grant for 6 years, and we have a comprehensive research program, and I really want to pursue this research program. So I don't want the Nobel... I'm very happy, very honored, of course, but I don't want this to get in the way of, to change the course of what I plan to do with my team. We have a whole team, a whole lab. But we have collaborators in London, but in Paris I have a whole lab, and I want that we pursue our research program. So on Monday I was in Zurich working with a co-author on the whiteboard. I don't want to change my habits at all.
Yeah. If anything, this is kind of a confirmation and a push forward.
Well, it's an encouragement, but I don't want to stop. I would be dead if I stop. So I think more than ever I want to pursue the research program.
Very good. Glad to hear that.
So we've mentioned first many of your successes, but now looking back, would you say that there have been particularly useful or illuminating maybe moments of failure in your career so far?
Oh yes, I failed many times. When I was, I was trying the Grandes Écoles in France, I failed many exams, many. Then, I was at Harvard, Harvard student. I tried to get into the Harvard Society of Fellows. I failed. And I came to MIT, so MIT is not a failure, of course. And there, but I wanted, my first best at the time was the Harvard Society of Fellows, and I failed. And thanks to which I went to MIT, which is a fantastic place. And then I met Peter Howitt, with whom we developed the Chopin growth. So those have been, several times in my life, I had things, I didn't get what I wanted, and it was for the better, actually. Because what I ended up getting was better than what I thought. I think, misjudging, probably. You see? So
yeah, it's encouraging to hear that failures can re-steer.
That's right.
Yeah, very good. So while we're kind of looking back at your career, is there any advice that you would give to young economists these days?
Be persistent. Pursue your curiosity and persistence. Curiosity and persistence, and don't give up. Be ambitious. Ambition, curiosity, and persistence. Those are three things that I think important. Go for big questions. Be persistent. And show curiosity, and never let down, and be resistant. Be resilient. You will face number of obstacles, number of setbacks, but you should hold on. That would be my advice.
Very encouraging to hear. Actually, as a follow-up, you said pursue the big questions.
Yeah.
Obviously, you found a very big question, or like a very big, problem to solve with Peter Howard. How do you find big questions? What do you think is?
I think, in my case, it came. I don't know if I found big questions, but in my case, my topics came very much from interplay. I was socially motivated. I was into politics when I was young, militant. And so I came to economics from politics, I was not in politics myself, but I was a militant. And so I was very much motivated. I wanted to study economics to improve the world. To change the world, improve the world. So that drove me. And I knew the big, I knew some big question, and others I didn't. And then it comes, then the question comes also because you attend a seminar suddenly, and someone says something. But this has not been tried. You get some, suddenly it can be serendipitous very easily.
But when you look now at the motivation driving your colleagues, your PhD students, do you see any changes compared to a few decades ago into what?
No, I think they pursue that. You can see here the students. We attended a beautiful meeting with a Cambridge student, and they have fantastic ideas, and they very original, very promising, and I think that's the best you can hope for. Yeah.
Excellent. We were actually curious on a more personal level about how you essentially accumulate your knowledge, or how you essentially your sources of information. We were curious about what books might be on your bedside table that you have not yet been able to read. So essentially about your knowledge at T+1. Anything you'd like to mention?
I bought a book by Philippe Sands. You may know Philippe Sands on Chile. Voilà, that I just bought. I just got that book. But there might be other books as well that that's the book that I have barely started to read, and I enjoyed very much the East-West Street book by Philippe Sands.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you so much.
We look forward to your lectures, Professor.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.